Hello and welcome back. In this session, we're going to discuss one of the most powerful ways that you can improve your understanding and comprehension of Salesforce, teaching someone else. There's loads of reasons why teaching is such an effective way when it comes to learning Salesforce. So let's walk through a couple now. Before we dive into that, I want to quickly cover a common objection I hear when I suggest this method. I don't have anyone to teach Salesforce to. Well, in an ideal world, you'd be part of a study group or have a Salesforce study buddy, but this isn't always the case. When I started learning Salesforce in March 2020, I didn't know anything about it or anyone in the Salesforce ecosystem that I could really connect with. My knowledge of Salesforce and the Salesforce ecosystem was that limited that I wasn't aware of any trailblazer groups that I could join or anyone else who was studying for the administrator certification. So I took another approach and I started teaching my dog Salesforce. While she couldn't ask me questions or test me, she was always willing to listen. It was only when I was speaking to a developer friend of mine earlier this year that I found out that this is also known as the rubber duck debugging technique, and it's a way of debugging your code by explaining it line by line to a rubber duck, like one you would have in the bath. There really is no excuse for not being able to use this method. Granted, it is more effective when you are teaching someone who can ask you questions and provide feedback, but even if you don't have someone to teach, you can still use a rubber duck. So let's talk about the benefits of teaching someone else. When you know that you're going to be teaching someone else a concept or feature, you approach your studies in a different way. I've always found that when I study with the intention of teaching someone else, I really dig into the information more than I would do normally. Not only that, I simplify the information as much as possible so it's easier to understand and it's easy for me to teach. This results in a deeper understanding of the concept or feature as I've taken the time to really comprehend the material. I also find that because I'm more focused and deliberate in my studies, I have a stronger emotional connection which helps me remember what I'm learning. Combine this with the detailed notes and additional resources that I've created and I really do have a solid understanding and comprehension. But it's not just the way that you approach studying that makes a difference. It's the different perspectives that you gain from others. When you are teaching someone else, they'll often have a different way of thinking about something and possibly a different way of remembering or recalling that information. Another fantastic benefit is that your study buddies can ask you questions and test your knowledge and understanding. This is a key way to turbocharge your learning. When people ask you questions, it forces you to recall the information and to rephrase or repurpose it in a coherent explanation. If you can't answer the question, then you know it's something that you need to focus your studies on. What I've also found is that when I'm teaching someone else something, I can easily identify any areas or points where I'm not confident and I need to revisit. This is a great way to fine-tune your studies and to ensure that you know the information inside out. Perhaps the biggest benefit of teaching someone else is something that we touched on earlier, simplifying the information for better understanding and comprehension. When we learn Salesforce concepts, we're often presented with a huge amount of information from blog posts, YouTube videos, trailheads, and other courses. Initially, this might be overwhelming and we can find ourselves getting caught in the weeds or lost in all the various sources of information. However, when we're tasked with teaching someone, we aim for clarity. This pushes us to distill the information, separating the essential from the non-essential and focusing on the core principles or functionalities. We gain a clearer picture of the concept as a whole. When preparing to teach, we categorize and structure that information. This act of restructuring requires a deep dive into the material. We must understand the why, the how, and the interconnections. For instance, we might look at the concept of lead management and we might break it down into its foundational steps: lead capture, qualification, distribution, and conversion. By doing so, we internalize the process and understand its sequence and importance. Simplifying often involves using known concepts or real-world scenarios for easier explanation. This makes the content relatable for the learner, but it also aids the teacher's memory. Linking Salesforce functionalities with real-world applications or analogies creates memorable anchors and it allows for faster and easier recall. Simplification also demands cognitive engagement. When we actively process information to break it down, we're not passively absorbing it, we're interacting with the content, which improves memory retention. your brain is more likely to remember content it has actively engaged with, rearranged, or reinterpreted. When teaching simplified concepts, learners are more inclined to engage, ask questions, and seek clarification. This feedback loop prompts the teacher to revisit and sometimes re-simplify or explain in a different way. Each iteration not only reinforces the teacher's understanding, but also identifies and strengthens any weak spots in their knowledge. Teaching Salesforce isn't just about helping others. It's a way of boosting your own understanding and memory. Even if you have no one to teach, you can still use the rubber duck debugging approach. But when you can teach real people, that's where the biggest gains are made. Teaching forces you to dive deep, to clarify tricky parts, and to connect topics in relatable ways. And every question thrown your way is a chance to refine what you know and to spot where you need a bit more study time. By teaching and breaking down Salesforce concepts for others, you're really turbocharging your learning.